Hi everyone, welcome to another webinar from uLaw. This one is the first of 2016. We'll be having 12 such events this year, most likely on the last week of the month, and we'll be sending you notices, via our mailing to actually register for them. So this particular webinar is about what we call context data, sensitive data. What we mean by that is how can the data that you give have relevance and context based on how you're actually doing that. And to kind of show that, we will be using two examples in our system. One is what we call the form generation, and we'll also show a little bit of analytics that's coming as well and relate to the two. Okay. So to do this, what I'm going to do is first create a client. So to do that in uLaw, you will click on the new contact panel. You will click on client. And once you click on client, it gives you a whole range of things to fill in. So let's say this client's name is Harry Fielderman, and he's at, say, 81 King Street, Ottawa, Ontario, and you can fill in all the details. As you saw, like it prompts you. You can declare that it's his mailing address. You can add more addresses. You can say 82 Queen Street is his say his work address. So Toronto, Ontario is his work address. Now, the reason why what is context-sensitive data is you're basically giving information as data, and then if a software can actually collate the context of what you're actually giving and put it together when it's doing other things, that's what is called context-sensitive data. Like, for example, you give two phone numbers, so let's say, and there's another one where you say 613. Now, if you say that the second one is actually work, while the first one is actually home, what the software can do is it can use these kind of data at various places. It can say, oh, I'm actually filling a form and I need this address. Maybe if the home number is there, I can kind of fill in these data. So that's what we call by saying context sensitive. And also combining the view of all the data that's present for a particular client with respect to the matters and bringing that context in is also called context sensitive data. So now we've filled in all these details. Let's create a matter for this person. So we go here into the matter section, and we have a whole range of areas. I'm going to choose this time families and bills, say, for example. I can say, let's say it's a divorce matter, so you can say Harry versus Jennifer divorce, and you can hit the save button. Now, the way you feed in the data into the system, it also should be very transparent. You should not even know that it's actually being picked up. Like, for example, let's say you are actually picking information about Jennifer, who's the opponent. You can actually go to additional parties, add a party, and you can say Jennifer. Actually, we have Jennifer Olson. Let's say she is the opponent. So you can just click here and say she is the opponent. In this case, I'm going to make her the respondent, right? And you can hit the save button. Now, if this was a small claims matter, so let me just change that. Let's say if this was a small claims matter, and assuming that this person was actually, Harry Fieldman was actually a plaintiff, what you can do is you can click here, edit item, and mark this one as a defendant. So you can say Jennifer Olson is actually a defendant. So let me make that small claims because it's more relevant to our discussion. So you can say SEC-12345. And the next information that I want to give here is the court file information. So I can always go to the code file information, click on it, and I can say SC-12345 and hit the save button. Now, more information that we can give, the better the software is actually going to react to this. For example, if I click on Add Party and I say Judy Sylvester is actually the opponent's representative, and I hit the save button. So now, what I've already done is I've created Harry as the plaintiff for this small claims matter. I've created Jennifer Olson as the defendant. I've created Judy Sylvester as the opponent. Now, let's say there are two plaintiffs. Like, this is not just Harry, but he's actually battling Judy with one other person. Let's say there's another Harry, say Harry Henderson and Harry Fielders are fighting Jennifer. So he can say, I add another plaintiff to this whole equation. And I can say now there are two plaintiffs and one defendant, and that's the opponent representative. Now, when you create these kind of data, all you're doing is you're just giving the system the data. Now, when things are being formed together, in other contexts, the software has to have the notion of saying, oh, these things are actually related, and pull them out in a format that can actually be helpful. Now, I'm going to open my VirtualBox here for displaying Word documents because small claims court forms are all in Word. So while that is actually happening in this side, I'm going to actually create let me just that's my Word document viewer. I'm going to keep that in the side, and let me actually now go ahead and start generating documents. So the first document I'm going to do here is a plaintiff claim. So I'm going to click on Document Generation, click on Forms, click on SCC, and choose the form. So in this case, plaintiff's claim. And then I'm going to choose the courthouse. So let's say this one is actually at Ottawa. I can just start typing Ottawa, and it immediately chooses the Ottawa courthouse. And then I hit that download button. Now, when I hit the download button, this is where the software starts becoming smart. It takes the context-sensitive data, assembles it together, and puts together this document called Fieldman Harry. So I'm going to open this document in my word processing here. So this is Word. I'm just opening it in Word. And you will now see that the software has already understood quite a amount of information that we've actually given and put them all in context. So for example, it's at Ottawa Courthouse. It put all the address and the information. It's already picked Fieldman as the plaintiff. It picked you as his representative. It even filled in your LSUC number. And then it started filling in the opponent's number. So in our case here, we said Jennifer Olson is the opponent, the defendant. It started filling her number. Judy Sylvester, who is the representative, it started filling her information. And then it started filling all the details for this form. Now this form is, as you see, is fairly filled out. It is almost done, and 80% of the form is actually done. Now let's look at more complex ones. Like for example, the small claims case example itself, let me say we are actually doing, say, a simple garnishment statement. Okay, so let's do a garnishment statement. Again, Ottawa Courthouse, and do the download. And when we do the download, we'll now see that the second document here, I'm going to close this one here and open that document. Now, you'll see the relevance is a little different. It basically, in this case, it just picked up the creditors. So let me actually pick a more simpler document here. Let's say offer to settlement or something like that. When I do that, you will now see that's form 14. It now understands that Harry Filderman and Harry Henderson are plaintiffs, so it put them in the plaintiff's field. It put Jennifer Olson as the defendant, and it started linking who is who, and and it says here, the person Jason Richardson is the legal representative of Harry Fieldman. So basically, it took all the data that we gave in the matter, related them, and then started filling the form. So now all you need to do is basically just sign the representative and the information, and you're pretty much done with this form. So as you see here, context-sensitive data has to make sense the way the form is actually meant to be. Like, for example, if I would just change this from here to be more a landlord and tenant matter, okay, I'm just going to do that on the fly, and I'm going to now start saying, like, Judy is the representative, but just say Jennifer Olson is now not a defendant anymore, but she's actually a tenant. So let me do that. So I'm going to, somebody's having, so I'm going to now change this one to actually a tenant, unlock, and save. And when I do that, when I go back to the bottom and actually do the document, landlord and tenant, and I do say an L7 or anything like that, now it has to understand the relationship that has changed here in the matter and accordingly fill in everything. So in this case, as you see now, it fills in, it picks the address of Jennifer and fills it as a tenant. It filled in, see, this one is 81 King Street, Toronto, and then it fills in 81 King Street, Ottawa for Harry. And then it filled in the tenant's address, his or her representative, and went ahead. So let me just, so it basically takes care of context sensitivity that you established in the program and starts filling those details in the form wherever it's required. Let's now look at even more complex example. Like, for example, I'm now going to make this one an accident benefit, claim or something like that. So let's see if there's any accident benefit. Here it is. So let's say accident benefits. So I'm going to hit save. Now, in accident benefits, there are a lot more context that you can establish for a matter. Like, for example, you can say who's the employer. So you can say CC Incorporation is my employer, right? You can give that information. Now, you can even say who's your health practitioner. So let's say Dr. Brown, say Charles. Elizabeth Crowns is my health practitioner, right? You can give that information. You can also add more information, like, for example, insurance company. Let's say you add, so just say the ABC company is actually the insurance company, so you can get all these details. Now, when you give these details, again, it has to correlate all these data that you have given as additional parties, and then you actually do document generation, and you do now SABs, right? And you're doing some, say, expense claim form, and you're hitting the download button. Now, it's going to take all this information and put it together. So Harry Fieldman, it filled in all this information. So this form is a very straightforward form, so you just filled it. But let's take a more complex form. Let's say treatment confirmation or something like that, where the health practitioner is actually involved. So here you go. So here, it filled in your phone number and all the details. It also filled in the insurance company details. It filled in the practitioner, Elizabeth Brown, her family clinic, everything, all the details. So you just continue and say, oh, she's my chiropractor, and then you can also answer some more, questions. So basically, you kind of take off from where we have left off and even continue from there. Like, for example, the name of the applicant and the substitution decision maker can be filled in. Like, for example, if you know that Harry Fieldman is not in a position to actually respond, but it's this other Harry Henderson who is going to be the substitute decision maker, we can actually say he is the substitute decision maker. And now that exact same form will actually start using Harry Henderson as that. So if I go back to that same form, and I actually do treatment assessment plan and hit the download button, and now I should see the substitute decision maker should be filled out properly. There you go, Harry Henderson is actually filled out instead of Harry Fieldman. So the software understands context-sensitive data with respect to the additional parties that we are giving, and it actually starts filling the form with those data. So now, when I look at additional parties, there are other things that make sense. Like, for example, attention. You may want to actually direct a letter to a corporation with someone as an attention. So you could do that by clicking the attention button. Now you could obviously plaintiff and defendants are both used for small claims. Landlord and tenant is for landlord and tenant. Credit and debtor also is used for landlord and tenant matters. Child is a very useful entity. It's used in family law. So whenever you indicate someone as a child, all the forms where the child information needs to be filled in will all be filled in there. Applicant and respondents are for family law again. Representative of opponent is a general one. So what it does is it takes the opponent in question, relates this representative to that, and then takes things from there. Primary contact could be established. Spouse could be established as well. So like, for example, if we said, let's say Sally Schumacher and Harry Fieldman are spouses, what will happen is every time you do any document which is like a joint retainer or anything in that relationship, like for example, I'm going to try an authorization letter. I believe will immediately pick it up and say, in this case, it immediately picked in Harry Fieldman and Sally Schumacher. It knows that the spouse has to sign an authorization document together, so it kind of takes that information and just combines it. So as soon as you establish, a data with a relationship, that context that you've given to the data is actually taken to the next level. So going back, spouse, you can give employer, employee, substitute decision maker. We already saw that in the SAPS form. If the person who is actually injured is not able to take the decision, you can actually give who's the substitute decision maker. And you can also give the insurance company. You can give a caregiver, who's a caregiver of. Dependent, like for example, in the insurance form, sometimes you have to fill in children. So if you put it as a child or a dependent, you'll automatically pick that up. Insurance representative is something that is interesting as well. Like, if the insurance company is actually having a representative for them, you can give that information. Co-accused, police officer who was, like, for example, a speeding matter. You can say who's the police officer who was actually in question, and other insurance adjusters. So basically, you can give all these data, and all these data actually has meaning and process into the system. Now, each of these components also have an action button here where you can say, I want to do a business letterhead, a master letterhead. Sometimes even you want to just do a conflict screening. Like, for example, you put Sally Schumacher. You may just want to click on her and just make sure that you don't have a conflict actually with her in this matter. So you want to make sure that, this matter is representable and you can actually generate a conflict screening right. Now, obviously, you would do conflict screening right here. So when you enter Sally information, you click on the action button here and you would do a conflict screening right here. You would make sure that you don't have an issue taking on this matter for Harry just because Sally is his spouse. You would do that conflict check here. But once you would finish that conflict check, what you need to do is, so that's basically the conflict check for Sally Schumacher. But once you've done the conflict check, you need to produce this document here saying how you basically resolve the conflict. You can say it was a new matter for an existing client, no conflict. Sally was a spouse of Harry, who is my client, and we see no conflict, right? And then you can say the retainer was not declined, and move on. So basically, the software can pretty much take it from here. Now, I'm going to put the conversation a little bit into presentation mode and take it from there. I've been getting a few this saying that there is no audio. Is audio not visible? Are people not able to log into the system and listen? Can I hear some feedback? Like, are people able to listen to my voice? Hi, are people able to actually listen to my voice? Because I'm getting a few comments saying that there's no sound.
There's no audio.
I can hear.
There's no audio on the computer. We have to call in by telephone.
Oh, yes. Okay, I think that's the confusion people are having. But I've been posting, how to call in. Okay, but you guys are able to hear me, right?
Yes.
By phone, yes.
Thank you. I'll go back in presentation mode. So continuing back where we left, so the context that we establish for all this data in terms of where you're putting stuff, the software is able to relate it. Now, the next thing that we want to do on context sensitivity is how we can not only do certain data in form filling, how we can actually take it to the other steps. Now, in this case, actually we started off by making this a families and will matter. Right? So let's do that. And let's put some very simple dockets and invoice and see how silently context can be built around that. So I'm going to do an initial client meeting of 1.2. And actually, I'm going to do two matters for this person. One is a civil matter, and another one is a family and wills matter. And we will show you how context sensitivity has actually established an area of practice. So this is a simple civil matter, and I can create another matter. Let's say he's a repeat client. Let's create a civil matter, and we can say Harry versus Dana. And this one also has an initial client meeting, and that one is just 0.6. So let's now create two invoices in uLaw, one in the civil matter and one in the family matter. And you will see how the context of what you describe as area of practice can actually be used. So this is my first invoice. So I'm going to do that in the uLaw theme. So this is my invoice in the uLaw theme. So there you see clearly that $101 has been realized in the civil matter. Now let's go back to the other matter, which is actually a families and wills matter, and I'm going to do the exact same invoice here as well and raise this invoice. Now, when you have raised two invoices in two different categories, one is an area of practice of family, and the other one was in civil, what the software can do is, again, take this data and put a context around it. So when I go to accounting, and when I actually look at my, what we call the fee book, right, and download that, the fee book is basically a law society guidelines. You need to do this every 15 days to make sure, like, what you're actually billing. So for Harry Fill the Men, you now have two invoices that you raise, one for $101 in civil and the $203 for this one. What the software actually does is it starts predicting to you how the money is actually being made in this matter. So it shows you that how much money was made in each of the areas. So civil is this much, tribunal is this much, and then it starts putting that context together to say where the revenues are actually realized. So in this case, I think I kind of marked it in the wrong place. I should have. That was smart. It actually starts putting the whole thing together and gives that whole view to you in kind of a bar chart and shows you how much revenue are you making together for Harry and individually, and then plots that to tell you how much is the legal work versus the disbursement work. So basically, what you're getting here, again, as contextual data is being put together and organized as a charting for you. So if I would actually go ahead and actually even analyze this, so I click on Analytics, and I would actually look at, say, the accounting data in my fee book by clients, and I can look at it, say, the quarterly, or even just, and I would do it by analysis. It will tell me that this is all the money that I've been making on this. So Harry Fieldman, I made $305. So I look at it as a bar chart. It will show me who is where. And if I look at it as a pie chart, it kind of gives me and say, oh, Harry Fieldman is here. James Smith is here. It kind of gives you a 2-minute overview of where the dollars are actually coming from. That's from the client. But in context sensitivity terms, if I do it by category and analyze the exact same thing, now you will see civil has so much, real estate has so much, immigration has so much. So it kind of gives you again the split of the category and then the pie of the exact same data. So the context sensitivity of the data can not only be used in forms, but it also can be very, very, very powerful in analytics. Okay. Now, if I were to do a more context analysis of this Harry in Insight, actually I can do it in a much more easier way. I go to Matters, and if I choose Harry Fieldman, and I just click on this question mark and do Insight. Now what it'll do is it'll actually look at Harry as a whole. It'll tell me like how the fee book is, what is pending. So it says the client owes for 2 accounts. That's the total that he actually owes. And it gives you a detailed view of what's being paid so far, what's not being paid so far, like does he have any money in trust to actually transfer, what's the balance. It gives you that whole view of his trust and his receivables. So that's the highest invoice for this matter, and that's the second invoice for that matter. It kind of gives you that. So again, splitting the data for its context to give you that holistic picture in Insight is also another example of how we can actually do context sensitivity and other things within uLaw. Okay. Let me now close this. Go back to the matter. Another context sensitivity data that we wanted to establish is in terms of disbursements. Now, disbursements are again very expenses that have, there are 2 kinds of disbursements. Now, disbursements that you basically pay from trust disbursements that you pay from general, and then there is another category of office expenses. So let's do a couple of expenses and then look at context sensitivity in terms of expenses. So I'm going to now do a disbursement from general. Let's say, this was a court fee that I paid for $70, right? And it was tax exempted. And I paid to Ottawa Courthouse. I need to put a few disbursements to actually see the categorization. I'm also going to put another one related to, fax. So I can say fax. And this might say I'm charging for 6 fax, but maybe I did this at Staples Business Depot, and I actually paid $2 for it, right? And it was paid using my credit card. And hit the save button. Now I'm going to put a few office expenses, and then we look at all of them together as a contextual view. So if I go back to accounts and I say, today I actually paid for my Google advertisement. I can say Google advertisement, January, Google AdWords, and let's say it was $110, and then immediately the HST is calculated, paid to Google, and hit the submit button. And let's say we also paid rent at the same time. We can say expenses, office expenses, and you can say rent, and you can say property rent, and let's say it was $650 with HST, and hit the submit button. Okay. Now when you do this, I've already put enough expenses. So let's now look at contextual analytics for expense people. Okay, I'm just going to do for today so that it's much more clear, and I'll do download. So now what the software does is it's taken all the expenses. Obviously, expense book is again a law society requirement that you need to prepare this on a monthly basis. The first part is that. The second part is where now we start establishing, saying that just if you look at it today, the expense on client was about 8.68%, and 13.22 is that. Again, somebody's complaining about sound. Let me just take care of that. And if I go a little bit down, again categorizes it, okay, and then takes it to the next step of showing it to you in a bar chart. And this is a report. Now you can also pull this exact same data in analytics as well. You can say analytics, then you can say accounts. Obviously now I want to see the expense by chart. So let me do that. And I want to do for today, so I can just establish for today, hit the analytical button. There you go, rent, client expenses, and Google advertisement, all three are added together, the bar chart view of it, and the pie chart view of it. So again, when you gave in the data, all you did was you just categorized them as contextual information. Then when we produce reports for you, we were able to analyze it, break it down into HST or appropriate tax jurisdiction for the required Canadian province, split it out, and give it back to you as a report in a very context-sensual manner. So, and this really matters basically because if you can kind of very minimally, when you collect information from user by just a couple of clicks, like whether it is area of practice, or whether it is, when you're entering an expense, you basically kind of enforce that category into them to establish some form of regularization in your business. The value add that this data can actually bring to you, like a month from now or a year from now, is huge. It's tremendous to actually see data, this format, and actually see how much have you actually spent on Google. So at the end of the month, you can actually look and say, oh my God, my Google advertisement is 13% of expense of my entire business. So it kind of gives you like a holistic view or, of how much you're spending each and every category. So again, collecting the data in a very subtle way that you don't even recognize that you're actually giving us that data, and then producing that exact same report for you much later that's so valuable is where the software has merged the context sensitivity and the analytical report or form-filling nature. So at this point, I'm closer to the 45-minute webinar. I'm going to open the lines for questions, and we'll keep it like an open dialogue. And as people ask questions, I can demo these features. So let me open the and get back to conversation mode. So at this point, the webinar is in conversation mode. We have about another 7 minutes. So if people have questions, you can ask me, and then I can explain more on context sensitivity, how we are doing certain things, and take it to the next stage. Okay, I have a question here on chat line about work in progress. Well, let me quickly show you what is work in progress. So in Quick View or in Calendar, you can always click on the small button here, and that will actually show you work in progress. So it brings you this action button, and there's a report here called work in progress that you can do. And you can do, let me just do for the month of January. I can do a download button. What this will do is it will show you a work in progress report of who are all the matter that have been unbilled or flat rate, and how much total you have a potential to actually bill. It just shows you, and how long is the activity date. It just shows you that. So that's the work in progress. Obviously, it doesn't have a lot of relevance with respect to context sensitivity, but thanks for the question. But this is a work in progress report. Again, I'll repeat, under calendar, there's a small button here. Under the action button, you can hit the work in progress report. Now, that calendar also has other reports, like for example, you can establish a client summary report. You can do that for just say this month. Let me get that going. That's a longer report. And it also has, so let me pull that report. So that report actually gives you, for this month, all the clients whom you dealt with, what's the estimated hours that you actually billed for them, and how much is the real billing that you actually did, and it adds it up and tells you, you estimated 137 hours and 17 minutes, but you actually only bill them 29 hours and 29 minutes. Okay, so it kind of gives you a view of how much was estimated and how much was actually billed. Okay, obviously the discrepancy came here because of this person, where we estimated so much but we only billed him so much. Okay, and it also, there are other reports that are very useful there. Like for example, there's one called service summary report. We can do that. That's a very beautiful report too. That kind of shows you how to actually relate the services that were done. So it tells you, in this firm, the legal counsels, paralegals, and lawyers worked for this much hours and billed this much. The assistants estimated so much and this much was billed. Who are the people involved? So in this case, obviously, the practitioner was here, and the assistant is here, right? It kind of breaks it down into different hours. Okay. Similar reports can also be achieved for just a timesheet. For example, if you just want a normal timesheet, like for this month or even today, right? You can just download, and that's your timesheet for just today. So it will just establish January 29 timesheet, what are all the dockets that you've been working on, when it was started and when it ends. So that's the only question I see in chat line. Is there any other questions? Great. not, I'm just going to summarize. So as we saw, additional parties for a matter can actually be entered here by clicking on the additional parties, and you can add parties. We added so much context-sensitive information to them. So when you actually give us a contact, we can say what they are. We already had previously context-sensitive information like area of practice, and even subtle ones, like for example, when you actually do expenses without even recognizing, you're actually putting categories, which is like again another context-sensitive information. And what we showcased during this webinar is how we could take all this information, fill in various kinds of forms. So right now, uLaw does the following area of forms: small claims, landlord and tenant, POA, HTA, WSIB, SABS, family law, and criminal. It does all these areas of forms in context-sensitive manner. We also saw area of practice was actually used for revenue side of the business, and in accounts, we actually saw that the category of expenses that you actually put in helped us to give us analytical reports in that category. With that, I come to a conclusion for this webinar. I want to thank all of you who attended it. This webinar will be posted on the web in our YouTube channel in a day or two, and you should be able to see it as well. Thank you, and we hope you will be part of our next series next month. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.